This is my DIY NAS. It has 96 gigabytes of capacity. It has very fast 10 gigabit speeds. It's silent, compact, has a minimal design. It's cheaper than other NAS brands, and it solves all my storage problems. But why do you even need something like this? For the longest time, I've always struggled to deal with storage space on my devices, especially as a gamer / content creator / data hoarder. So I keep finding shortcuts to alleviate this problem, whether that's buying some hard drives, deleting old games, footage files, or even just putting some stuff on the cloud. But the cycle keeps going on, and I end up back in the same spot. No space. Now, an easy fix is to put everything in cloud storage, but that's really expensive over time. So if I don't do that and I don't have backups of my files, what if one of my hard drives fail? After all, it's not a question about if it will fail, it's a question about when it will fail. And I knew there had to be a better way. Now, I've always heard of NAS devices or network attached storage devices, so I decided to dive into the rabbit hole. Let's pause right there. Essentially, a NAS is a box filled with hard drives. You can access this from anywhere and on any device. It's kind of like having your own Google Drive, but it's cheaper, you control it, and you can do more with it. However, as I looked deeper into NAS systems, they weren't as straightforward as I thought. And I had three major problems with the existing devices on the market. The first issue is that they are expensive. Cost per bay is the biggest factor I look at when deciding on a NAS, because the more bays you have, the more hard drives you can insert, which affects your maximum storage you can have. Most brands are quite expensive, and even when you get models with more hard drive bays, the cost per bay doesn't get cheaper. The second issue is limited speeds. There are a few factors that improve speeds on a NAS, but what limits the speed the most is the Ethernet port. Most NAS devices come with a 1 gigabit per second Ethernet port, and it costs quite a bit to upgrade to like a 2.5 or a 10 gigabit per second port, making the system even more expensive. Now, the third issue is underwhelming hardware. I'll use Synology as an example since they seem to be the most popular brand. The Synology NAS devices tend to have low RAM and no SSDs for caching, so it's slower, CPUs that draw more power, which means more cost over time, and their entry models have low hard drive bays, so max storage is limited. Most of these can be upgraded, but they aren't cheap. And if you go with the non-plus Synology models that are cheaper, in addition, we have slower CPUs, no expandable RAM or SSDs, so no future upgradability, no integrated graphics for video encoding or decoding, which means you cannot take advantage of all the features a NAS system has to offer. They can also be noisy, which is annoying if you have these around you, and they're just ugly. But we can work with that. So I started looking at how I could build my own NAS better than something like a Synology. So I had a couple of goals with this build. Number one, minimum 6 hard drive bays, ideally 8 just to maximize on storage. A small to medium form factor, so it just fits on a shelf or a small space. Reasonable power consumption to avoid electricity bills. Hardware for future proofing so I can explore more advanced features in the future. Reputable hardware, I really do want to rely on this NAS for years to come. All the parts need to be new and easily available. I do love seeing cool builds on YouTube, but it sucks when I can't replicate it myself. And of course, it needs to be cheaper than Synology. Now, parts can be a little bit tricky because building a NAS system seems like quite a niche hobby. So not a lot of brands cater to the specific needs of NAS builds. Anyway, after a lot of days of researching and comparing specs, here's all the parts that I picked for this build. For the case, I really wanted to go with the most bays possible to make it cost effective. A company called Johnsbow are one of the few brands that actually make dedicated NAS enclosures. So I went with their Johnsbow N3. For the motherboard, most big PC brands we're familiar with have motherboards that are just too expensive. And it's annoying because they lack SATA ports, which is what we need to connect our hard drives to our NAS. However, I did find a solution. I heard from the NAS building community that Topton was a good brand, so I ended up going with this N18 motherboard for a few reasons. Number one, it had an integrated Intel N100 chip and a CPU fan. The second was it had a low 6 watts of TDP to keep electricity costs down. And the third was it had a 10 gigabit per second Ethernet port. Even though I'm not set up for a 10 gigabit Ethernet system to fully take advantage of those maximum speeds, I wanted my NAS to be future-proofed and capable when I eventually upgrade. Now, for the PSU, I needed a power supply over 300 watts so the motherboard could work properly. So I picked up this SFX PSU from Silverstone. The rest of the parts aren't as critical, so feel free to pick them based on what's the cheapest in your region and still compatible with your motherboard. I picked up 16 gigabytes of RAM from Crucial. I thought that was enough for what I need. When I was choosing hard drives, I was balancing the best cost per terabyte and the amount I need to spend up front. I needed a minimum of 2 hard drives, so I needed to factor that into my budget. I went with 2 Seagate Iron Wolf 12 terabyte drives. these had a low cost per terabyte and would allow my max capacity to be quite high. Plus, I was also happy gradually adding in 12 terabyte chunks of storage as I needed. Now, if you frequently access files on your NAS, a cache is a great way to store those files so they are readily accessible. And it just makes everything run somewhat faster. And I grabbed a Kingston SSD for this. You'll also need a device to host your operating system. Rather than buying a high quality and fast enough USB, I opted for a faster SATA SSD, which actually ended up being cheaper. So I got this one from Silicon Power. I hadn't heard of this brand before, but the Amazon reviews sold me on it. Depending on the motherboard you get, they almost never have enough SATA ports. Mine only had 6. I need 8 ports for 8 hard drive bays, plus 1 for the SATA SSD without OS on it. So I just picked up an M.2 to SATA adapter to give me enough ports. I was a bit sus on this, but it seemed to be fine. I just got an 8-pack of SATA cables to link the hard drives to the motherboard and an extra one for that SATA SSD. I picked up some low noise fans as the stock ones were quite loud. These ones were quite cheap and fit my case dimensions. Now, when you connect these fans to the case, they run at 100%, which is unnecessary and loud. I actually got a fan splitter to connect my fans to the motherboard and control their speed through the BIOS. Spoiler, this did not work. So I picked up some low noise fan adapters, which lower the voltage supplied to the fans, thus reducing the fan speed. When it comes to the operating system for your NAS, your main options are TrueNAS and Unraid. I won't go in detail here about the differences or the benefits, but TrueNAS is free and Unraid ranges from 49 with 1 year of updates to 249 of lifetime updates. So I went with TrueNAS. For a quick reference, here's all the parts and preferred specs, and I will go over the pricing a little bit later in this video. I'll also leave links down below. For the actual build, depending on how this video performs, I may do a step-by-step guide, but for now, I'll just give you an overview of what to expect. The first step is getting a motherboard, inserting the RAM, SSD, and a SATA adapter. Take off the top of the Johnsbow case, attach the PSU to a mounting plate and secure it to this case. Then just remove the back plate. You can optionally replace the existing fans with some more silent fans. Then connect your Molex and SATA power cables to the hard drive backplate. Plug in both fan cables to the backplate, and optionally, you can use those low noise fan adapters I spoke about to slow the fan speed. Then close up the panel, attach the I/O panel, place in the motherboard, connect the cables to the motherboard and the PSU, attach the SATA SSD to the side of the case, connect the power and data cables, put the top panel back on, install the handles onto the hard drives, take off the front panel and install the hard drives into the drive bays, and then you just close it up. The next step was getting an operating system onto the NAS, which in hindsight was pretty straightforward, but initially was a little bit confusing. So firstly, you want to download the TrueNAS ISO image. You put that ISO image onto a USB using something like Balena Etcher. Then you plug that USB into your NAS. Then connect your NAS to your router using an Ethernet cable. Connect the NAS to a monitor and a keyboard. Turn on the NAS and go into the BIOS and make sure everything is working okay. So just check that all your system information is correct and set the TrueNAS USB as the boot device. Then restart your NAS and go through the TrueNAS installation process. When it's finished, it will show you a black screen with your NAS IP address at the top. Head over to your PC now and type in that IP address like this. Then you can just log in with your username and password that you created during the install phase. And now you can configure your NAS setup. I won't go into too much detail here. You set up a storage pool, which is where your data will be stored. You make yourself an admin so you can access your data. You create a data set and a shares, which is like a directory to access your NAS. And a bonus is setting up tests and backups so your NAS runs with no issues. That does sound like a lot, but it's pretty straightforward. And now it's actually time to use your NAS. Now, I know it sounds pretty stupid, but every video I've watched never actually shows you how to use your NAS in practical terms. Like, how do I access my files? Now, you pretty much open the Windows Explorer tab. You type in your IP address / dataset into the search bar, hit enter, and then you log in with that same username and password we created earlier. And it's just like having another folder on your computer. I pinned the main folder to my quick access bar on the side for convenience. And now you can create folders and drag and drop your files straight in here, and your NAS will automatically back that data up for you. In terms of data backup, I do wish there was something to indicate the process. but as long as there's no errors popping up on the main configuration screen, TrueNAS should be working perfectly. If you want to access your NAS on your phone or other devices when you're away from your home, you'll also need to set up something called Tailscale. This just creates a secure personal IP address that you can use to access your NAS from anywhere in the world. You just need to install the Tailscale app on your NAS and any device you want to use, then go through the Tailscale setup process, which will give you a new IP address. Now you can use that IP address in the same way as before. On an iPhone, in your Files app, you can just connect to a server, and now you have access to all your files on your phone while you're on the go. It's great. At the end of the day, how much did I end up spending? Here's how much I spent on all the parts I've mentioned in this video. I've broken them up into the essentials, which is what you'll need, the optional, because these are parts that only improve specs or make it quieter, and hard drives, because no matter what NAS system you buy, the hard drives will always remain a consistent price. And I will leave links in the description. Now, I did get a lot of the items from Alibaba because the parts aren't as accessible in Australia. I'm not a fan of shopping on Alibaba, nor the long shipping times, but I saw a bunch of people had no issues buying from there. And to be honest, neither did I. Just remember that sales always happen. So with the really expensive stuff, just wait and hope a sale pops up for these. In total, my DIY NAS build was 749 Australian dollars. Is that good or bad though? Now let's get to the whole point of this video. Did I achieve my goal of making this cheaper than other NAS devices? And how does my system compare to the big brands like Synology? My DIY NAS build with 8 bays is 748. If we compare this to Synology's 423 Plus model with 4 bays, that's 768. For the 620 Slim model with 6 bays, that's 799. And for the DS1821 Plus with 8 bays, it's 1,699 Australian. So my DIY NAS option beats all of these in terms of raw costs and has better specs across the entire range. The 1821 Plus version is more in line with my rig in terms of specs, but it's more than double the price for less performance still. But if you take a look at the cost per bay, it really cements just how much better my DIY option is. My DIY NAS with 8 bays has a cost per bay of $94. The 423 Plus model is $192. The 620 Slim with 6 bays is $133. And the 1821 Plus with 8 bays is $212. My DIY option is significantly less and at times less than half the cost. However, I did run into a problem. These models aren't Synology's cheapest product. Synology have a non-plus version of the DS423, which is 579 Australian. It's heavily underspecced and has no option for upgrades like the Plus versions. So I thought to myself, what if I were to remove the optional extras like the silent fans, the fan adapters, the M.2 cache, and downgrade the 16 gigabytes of RAM to 8 gigabytes of RAM? That would make it more in line with the DS423 in terms of specs, and you always have the option to upgrade later if you wish. But would it be cheaper? So if we look at the DS423, that is 591. And if we look at my DIY NAS build, the Lite version, that is $579. So after making those changes, the Lite version of my DIY NAS was $12 cheaper. And looking at the cost per bay, it's almost half the cost. The cost per bay of my Lite DIY NAS build was $74 and the Synology DS423 was $145, which is amazing news, especially if you're on a budget, because you can spend less upfront and still get 8 bays for future-proofing. Now I was happy I had achieved what I had set out to do and outperformed Synology. However, a bigger question was looming in the back of my head. After all this effort, will this NAS be reliable? Since I built this NAS myself, reliability is critical. So far, I've been using this NAS for over 4 to 5 months with 0 issues. I really wanted to wait a while before I made this video just because I'd hate to recommend something that isn't reliable. My biggest fear was once I transferred all of my data across, I'd potentially lose it all because of something stupid. However, it's been months and it's worked flawlessly. Now, after all that hard work, how does this NAS perform? When it comes to actual responsiveness of this NAS, it's so good. I wasn't sure if there would be a delay after I copy files, but there's none. I can save my file on one device and immediately access it on another. Even if I open something like a large camera file and watch the video on my phone, there is no delay. I can even quickly scrub through any point with zero loading time. However, it is a different story when it comes to read and write speeds. Even though my NAS is capable of 10 gigabit per second speeds, I can't take advantage of them because my internet system is limited to 1 gigabit per second. To take advantage of the full speeds, firstly, you need to have fast internet. And secondly, you need to have everything on your network to be running at 10 gigabits as well. That may include your router, the cables, your PC's network card, or any other network adapters you're using. So the speeds I get from my NAS are quite slow. If you're in the same situation, here's what you can expect. I probably get around 20 to 35 megabytes per second when just uploading files to the NAS, and 20 to 40 when downloading files from the NAS. It's probably going to be a little bit higher than that. I just copied a video I had laying around, and those are the real world speeds that I got. This sucks when you're initially trying to migrate all of your data across to your NAS, but it isn't too bad once it's finished and now you're just periodically dropping files onto your NAS as you need. I usually just have a transfer going on in the background and I continue to do my work, so it's not too big of an issue. And I've actually been okay with the speeds for my current use case. You may be asking, what was the point of making this NAS so powerful and fast if you can't even take advantage of those speeds? I just wanted to future-proof it because I do plan on upgrading my internet system in the future. The temperatures have also been at reasonable levels and very consistent whilst using the NAS. I've been getting between 34 to 39 degrees for the CPU, 31 to 36 for the hard drives, and 27 to 33 for the NVMe. I think ideally you want your NAS temps to be running within these ranges, so I'd say that the temps are pretty great. In terms of noise, the stock fans at a 100% will be pretty loud if you have this close to you. Even swapping these for some silent fans like I did will just be a little bit above the comfortable level. However, after installing these low noise fan adapters, I was very happy with the noise levels and it was so much quieter. In terms of power, unfortunately, I don't have the right tools to test the power draw of the NAS. However, I did choose a CPU with a low power consumption, so that will save me a little bit of coin over time. Now, there are a few things you need to know if you do go down this path. Firstly, it can be a little bit complicated if you're trying to wrap your head around this for the first time. So if you want to add hard drives or change your RAID setups, it's not straightforward. I believe you need to create a second pool and migrate your data across. I haven't done it, and I may make a follow-up video if people are interested. Another thing that will catch a lot of people is getting different size hard drives. The way TrueNAS actually works is it will limit you to the smallest hard drive in your pool. So let's say you buy a 12 terabyte and a 4 terabyte, the maximum space will be limited to 4 terabytes. And my last point is that something that may be obvious is that your NAS needs to be close to your router. That's something important to note if you're planning on taking advantage of 10 gigabit per second speeds, just because the cables actually need to reach your PC. My router is on the other side of the house, so it doesn't really work for me right now. So what are my thoughts after the whole process? Was it worth the trouble? I like this build. It does exactly what I needed to do, and after several months, it's been really reliable. After going through the whole process, it wasn't too difficult to do, and I was pretty happy that I was able to build my DIY NAS cheaper than a Synology NAS, while still being more powerful and not needing to upgrade my hardware in the future. However, I may be ignorant to some of the benefits that Synology has over this, so anyone that is smarter, comment your knowledge down below. I'm just sharing a cool project that I worked on as a complete NAS noob, and I built this epic device that has removed the headache of storage from my life, so I can't complain. If I were to nitpick, I would like a case that is slightly smaller and more optimized, and potentially more stylish. Regardless, I totally recommend giving your own DIY NAS build a try.